Okay, good evening, everyone. If you can hear me, wave your hand. Okay, good. I'm trying to see if how many members, EdCom members are online. I think we have maybe 7 or 8. So, John Mahoney, are you present?
I count 9.
Okay,
He's
9.
online, Larry.
Okay, good. All right. I know Dan Peterson is running late, and Brian might be running a few minutes late too.
I'm here. I'm just
Okay.
trying to stay off the video if I can for a minute.
That's fine. All right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our first EdCom virtual meeting of 2021. I think we have, as I mentioned earlier, I think we have maybe 10 members present now. So we have quorum. So I'm going to have a motion to start the meeting. Tonight, I believe we have a few, maybe one Board of Selectmen members joining us on Zoom, and the rest are probably watching us on TV. So couple of housekeeping items. If you're not talking, please mute your computer because it will create a feedback. All right, moving on. First item on the agenda is the approval of prior minutes. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
Move acceptance. Dennis.
Okay. Do I have a second? Just if you wave your hand, I can see it. Okay.
Ask them all as much as you want. You don't have to ask anyone.
Okay. And then, okay. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to do a roll call. Bernard? Okay. Bernard, yes. Jack? Okay. That's okay. You're on mute, Jack, but if you wave your hand, I can see you too. Sharon?
Yes.
Okay. Dan Peterson? All right, we'll skip him. Paul?
Yep.
Thank you. Dennis?
Yes.
Thank you. Brian?
Yep.
Thanks. Tom? John Mahoney?
And all the covers.
Yes.
Okay. Brad?
Yes.
Brad, I think you have to abstain since you're not at the first meeting.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, it's an abstain. So what we have is, and me, yes. So we have 10, 0, and 1. All right. I'm going to change the schedule, the agenda a little tonight due to a couple things going on. So instead of having the Public Works to come on first, I'm going to ask the town manager to provide his update first. Bill, all yours. You're still mute, Bill. You need to unmute.
Yeah, here we go. Okay.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new season of budget discussions and in preparation for town meetings. So thank you for your participation and volunteerism. It's great to have you all here tonight. So just a couple items for you to consider. I'll be presenting the warrants. There's actually 2 warrants going to be provided to you this year. One is for the annual town meeting, which includes about 20 articles for consideration. And there's a couple items that may draw some discussion, but I'm going to provide that discussion. I'll have a bit of a discussion with the Board of Selectmen next Tuesday night about that, and then I'll actually provide some more details for you to consider that. As far as we have another, for the first time in a while, we're going to do a special within the annual this year because we didn't do a special town meeting in the fall. So the way we do that is we essentially adjourn from the annual. The annual meeting is called to order, and then the moderator will then adjourn the annual to go into the special, and then we'll hold the special. Right now, there's about 3 articles for consideration, 2 collective bargaining agreements, and 1 a reserve fund setup that we have to look at as well. So there's really nothing in that's really controversial, but I just wanted to, because we have to do a special within the annual, because the special actually deals with revenue or an appropriation that has to occur within the same fiscal year, the existing fiscal year, which is the current fiscal year we're in right now, which is fiscal 21. Everything we do essentially for the annual town meeting will occur for FY22. So that's the reason for the two separate warrants for consideration. Last night I did present the budget to the selectmen. I assume many of you saw that, and I assume many of you have seen the new budget book, which I'm really grateful for the work that Maria Almodovar has done on that, along with George Samia and the finance team. This document I think is probably the most informative document I've seen since I've been here. And that's saying a lot because we've had a lot in the past under Randy Scollins, but this is a document that you'll see tonight that you have with you now, which is actually structured so that it will be under consideration for many of the pieces that go into the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association National Award for budget presentation. So our goal is to try and produce a document of that level and significance. And Marie actually came from Concord before she arrived here in Foxborough, and Concord is notorious for winning that award every single year. So she was able to draw a lot of the information from that experience in Concord and bring it here to Foxborough. So we're very grateful for her contributions in that area. So the presentation last night went pretty well. There was just a few questions. Board members did have questions ahead of time, which I was able to answer for them, so they didn't have a lot of questions following the presentation. There may be other discussion which will occur next week during the selectmen's meeting on February 2nd. And then I'll be with you again as needed for the budget reviews. I know that Chris Gallagher's got quite a bit of information to share with you tonight on his budgets, and so we're here to support you in any way necessary to make the process as smooth as possible. I do have a meeting with Dennis and with John, I think scheduled for tomorrow, so at 3 o'clock. So I'll be meeting with them on our budgets to go over those with them. And then other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, any of the members may have, Mr. Chairman, on you, going through you.
Hey, Bill, just can you give the committee a brief update on the revenue projection, how things are coming along, and what's your outlook on state aid, et cetera? Thank you.
Okay, well, it's funny you should say that because we actually did receive our first cherry sheet this afternoon from the state, and the governor and lieutenant governor made their presentation to the board, to the cities and towns at the MMA annual meeting on last Thursday and Friday this year. That was an interesting meeting because that meeting was again virtual, which has always been it's a 2-day meeting usually in Boston at the Heinz Convention Center. But what happened was that the governor came out with a budget proposal which shows about a 3.5% increase in unrestricted local aid, and then another 3.7% increase in Chapter 70 aid, which are the two major categories for consideration for the town. Now, what that is, the offset against that is whatever charges they may be from the state, and usually the one that's the biggest impact on us is the charter school. So at this point, we're looking at a flat state aid number, which we did carry last year, or in the current fiscal year, I should say. And that served us well because we really, at the end of the day, came in pretty much on a flat level. George and I talked about it this afternoon, and as the first cherry sheet came in today for consideration. Now, how that works for the new members is that there's about 6 different iterations of state aid and how that works. The first is the one from the governor, which comes out usually in the middle part of January, later part of January, and then the next one comes from the House Ways and Means Committee, and then comes from the House directly, and then it goes to the Senate Ways and Means Committee, then to the Senate, and then goes to a conference committee where they settle out the differences between the 2 or 3 amounts. It then goes back to the governor, where the governor can actually make a final recommendation. And then usually we see the final number sometime in June, late June, usually around June 29th, June 30th. So we go into town meeting with an estimate usually, and the final number doesn't really come out until after town meeting. But in this year, it came out really late. We didn't see the final state aid number until sometime in November this year, which was extraordinarily late. And that was, of course, due to all the COVID-19 impacts. But in terms of our other estimates, revenue estimates and where we are, I think that our revenue is actually looking pretty much on target with what we had estimated. We've been watching them very closely, and our numbers actually look pretty much on target with what we've estimated. The one thing that I carried in the upcoming year, in fiscal year 2022, is that I kept the new growth number low. I think the state aid number, our local receipt number, is up a little bit. That's because I do believe in the second half of 2022 we'll start which is actually the first half of calendar year 22 as well. So I do think that we'll start to see some of that rebound that people are talking about. I also think we'll see some of it in the fall of this year as well. So I do think that you may see fans back in the stadium possibly by the fall for football. I'm not sure you'll see much in the stadium for concerts and shows this year, but it really depends upon how fast we in this region can get to get the inoculations and vaccinations done, and we can reach that herd sensitivity, I guess is what it is, is the term used. And then we can reach that. Once we reach that, I think we're in a better position to actually start doing that. But we took a very conservative position going into the budget process. We're continuing that into the fiscal 22 process. But the good news is that we are balanced, and the only number that I get a little bit concerned for this current fiscal year overall is the new growth number. I'm just not seeing the growth come in for this fiscal year. We're not seeing building permits come out. There are things going out, but even the growth number that we put in there for an estimate is a really low number to begin with. It's the lowest number we've been carrying for many, many years. So we do think we'll make it, but it's just that we're not seeing the growth. And that's for two reasons. One is that we're not seeing, first of all, the new construction is a little bit slow right now due to the fact that the cost of materials is very high. And so we're not seeing new construction happen as quickly and as fast, and it's not rebounding as fast as we thought. The demand, however, is very high, and also interest rates remain low. So we're somewhat puzzled by the fact that we're not seeing more activity. But in talking with the building commissioner today and with our planning director, we do have stuff that's permitted or getting ready to be permitted, and so I think that's a good sign. The project, the fire station project in the center of town with the apartments and the new restaurant, that case has been resolved, and so we'll see. We're going to settle that. We're going to pass papers on the property in April, so we'll start seeing construction on that. So we'll probably see that growth in fiscal 22, but it's good to see that we're seeing some activity on that end. I also know that there was stuff going on up at Gillette too. So, like I said, I remain optimistic, but I'm still a little pessimistic about fiscal 2021, given the level of activity that we've seen this year. And let's hope that at least we can make it up on. There was a lot of permits pulled for home renovations, additions, things of that nature. A lot of people spent their money that way this year, as opposed to actually new construction that we've seen. But we did see some, but it's a little less than what I'm used to seeing. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. If there's any questions, again, I'll be happy to respond.
Any questions? Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, hi, Bill, and maybe this is more a question for George. But unless I missed something, in the overall budget book, and then with the supplemental information given out, all we have is very high level year-to-date expenses. Will we be able to look at line item year-to-date expenses as we get into the reviews further?
We can get that information for you. Year-to-date expenses are actually running pretty low right now, actually. Our revenues are in one direction, which is pretty much where we expected them to be, Dennis. Our actual expenses are actually running low on the low side. In fact, the reason is because we're not seeing a lot of activity. People aren't going anywhere. We're not spending a lot of extra money on the operational side. We've seen some positions swap out this year, which have reduced. That you'll see is going to be a reflection in the FY22 budget, where some of your costs and expenses relating to personnel will be on the lower side than it has been, because we're replacing people with lower salaries. But we're not seeing the in the overall expense side. I think we were running below 50%. Our expenses, we were running closer to about 35-40%, as I saw. So we're confident we're going to do fine. I also think that we'll actually finish the year in a pretty good position, because for two reasons. One is the fact that we did get a health insurance holiday, or half a holiday during the month of I think it was September of this year, and then this past year, and then we're going to get another one. I was pleased to be part of the vote that approved another holiday that's going to take place. We're going to take that in June of this fiscal year, which will then generate some free cash that we can use into next fiscal year. So, having a health insurance holiday is a pretty big thing. We only did it for one paycheck this year, but we're going to do it for two paychecks next in June. So that's about 6 weeks or 3 paychecks of deductions that we don't have to make for employees, and conversely, they don't have to make the deduction either. So they're going to save. The employees are going to save as well as the town. So it's a pretty big number, and so that should really help our free cash position going into fiscal 22. But I do think that we can get that information for you, Dennis, and I'll have Marie give you an indication of where we are. George can have that for you as well. But I'm very comfortable where our expenses are right now.
Hey, George or Marie, if you can email it to me, I'll make sure everybody gets it. Okay. Go ahead, Dennis. Sorry.
No,
Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions for Bill? Okay, looks like we're good. Thank you,
All right,
Bill.
well,
Thank
thanks
you.
very much, guys and ladies. We'll see you. I'll be seeing you soon, I'm sure.
All right. Talk to you
Take
later.
care now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Bye. Okay. Next on the agenda is the Water and Sewer Enterprise. And Chris Gallagher, welcome to AdCom. I believe you're the first, I won't say victim, but you're the first department head to present to AdCom. So Chris, all yours.
Seem to be the first every year. So I guess I get to set the path one way or the other for everybody else behind us. So no pressure on my end from the other department heads that I talked to today. So for anybody that doesn't know, anybody watching at home, I'm Chris Gallagher. I'm the DPW director. On tonight, I have Bob Worley, who's the water superintendent, as well as Lance Del Piore, who's the town engineer. And I believe there may be some other staff that's tuning in just because they know all the fun we're about to have tonight. So there may be some others watching at home. Just a quick introduction for the DPW. For anybody, again, new to the committee or watching at home, DPW is comprised of water and sewer, highway, tree and park, equipment maintenance. We have 43 employees. We manage the water you drink, over 110 miles of water main, 3 treatment plants, 12 groundwater wells, and we've recently surpassed over 6,000 water customers in the system, which is actually a 50% increase in the customers over the last 20 years. Going back to 2000, we had 4,000 customers in the system. We also have approximately 1,000 sewer customers, probably 35 miles of sewer pipe along with 6 lift stations. The highway side, we maintain over 90 miles of roadway. Tree and Park takes care of over 200 acres of fields. We take down anywhere from 50 to 100 hazardous or dead trees every year that are within the public right of way. We do that with our own staff. We plow all the streets, not only the streets, but we plow the sidewalks and all the town parking lots, school parking lots. And then our equipment maintenance division, which is our mechanics, responsible for all town vehicles and equipment. We currently have approximately 180 pieces of equipment in town. So that includes the school buses, police cars, all the DPW vehicles, COA vans, pretty much everything you see driving around town except for the fire apparatus. So that's just a brief introduction of the DPW of who we are and what we do. Unless there are, I want to touch base on just our budget process. How we've got to this point. We definitely take a team approach within the DPW. So as Bob and Lance are on the call tonight, we also get our admin staff involved, all of our supervisors involved that are out in the field on a daily basis. We all sit down and have a really a strategic planning session. That kicks off our next fiscal year. We really look at what our plan is for the future, not only the next year, but long term as well. With that kind of being the brief introduction to the DPW, I'm happy to take any general questions, or we can just jump right into the water and sewer budgets.
Go ahead. Go to the budget.
All right. So water and sewer, they're both enterprise funds, which means they are not funded by the general fund. So every time you turn your faucet on, every time you flush your toilet, you're paying that rate to the enterprise fund. So that's where the funding source comes from. While these budgets they're presented tonight by myself and Bob and Lance, they really belong to the Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners. So this is their budget. They've seen this, they've approved it, they've given us their guidance, and this is really their budget to bring to town meeting. So with that being said, we did receive slightly different guidance than the town manager gave for the general fund. We were given guidance to do everything we could to level fund the water and sewer budgets going into FY22. And I think you'll see that on the salaries and the expense side, we've done that as close as we can. One of the big things you will see on the water side is that we do have another large bond item for our capital projects for this fiscal year that we'll have to start paying on next year, which does drive, the overall increase up, but it is a planned increase that will be calculated into the rate increase that the commissioners will vote on later on this year in May. So with that, some of the highlights on the salary side of things, we did have some retirements in the current fiscal year, early in the fiscal year. Anytime we have retirements, anytime we have people leave for other jobs, we reassess the department, the structure of the department itself. So you'll see that in the salary side on the water budget, you'll see a jump in the assistant superintendent line item. One of the things that we did and reassessed was, we now have our third treatment plant online, and we really felt it was critical to the department to have an assistant superintendent specifically for treatment. So we split that position, and then we have a distribution assistant superintendent as well as a supervisor below that, that has rights over their supervision over the daily structure of the department, what they're doing day to day. So you'll see an increase there, but then you'll also see a decrease in the supervisor line item, as well as a decrease in the water treatment manager line item. So we're balancing it out. Something that, we take serious. We look at these line items every year, and those are some changes we decided to make within the department this year. So does anybody have any questions on the salary side of the water budget?
Nope, I don't see anyone. We're good.
On the expense side, with that third treatment plant coming online, we did budget some increases from last year into this year, knowing that it would be online sometime in the fiscal year. So now that it's online, we know that we're going to have to fund the electricity, heating, fuel, chemicals, all those things for an entire fiscal year starting, July 1st in for FY22. So you'll see some increases there. Electricity increases up, 6, almost 7%. There's, gasoline. One of the things we've noticed is that we've been under budgeting that line item. So we've increased that line item to cover what we've actually been spending the last few years. You will see a lot of decreases here. One of the things that we really do every year is look at these lines one by one. And that's kind of where the supervisory staff comes in. If we're not using a certain line item one year or the next to the full budget, we'll decrease it if we're able to do that, if we're confident that we can do that and continue the budget moving forward. So you'll see some decreases. You'll see some minor increases. Postage has gone up, 20%, along with our telephone line item. Those are the postage goes to our annual report that we have to mail out every year. And that's something that Bob spends a lot of time on. He would love to put some personal touches on it, but a lot of it is very specific to what DEP tells us we have to put in there for language. And it is a requirement that we have to send that out every year to every resident, and we have to mail that. Along with that increase, we're trying to do more public education. So we're trying to get more information out, water conservation purposes, for what we're doing throughout the town. So we're looking for an increase in that. And then telephone goes to our technology. One of the things we've done with Lance coming on board is really drive our GIS program, which is a mapping platform that we've been able to put into the hands and devices of all the staff that are in the field. So when they're out going to a water main break, if they're out trying to find a curb stop for a service, to do a dig safe mark out, whatever they happen to be doing in the field, they have that technology, they have that information in their hand, in the truck. So they're not driving to the site to see what it is, then back to the shop to find the records, and then driving back. So it's really streamlined that process, and we're going to continue on. Lance has been a huge driver in that program within the department. Say educational materials and supplies, again, we're increasing that. It looks like a big increase. It's a 15%. It's only $2,000, but that does go towards, again, that water conservation measure. We actually work with a group, the Neponset River Watershed Association, and they actually kind of do two things for us. They work with us on our stormwater side of things, but they also work with us on our water side of things. They actually go into the school systems, probably not this year, but they've been going into the school systems for us on our behalf and talking to the 5th grade students as part of their curriculum, not only on the stormwater side, but water conservation, talking about where the water in Foxborough comes from and giving them a little education on our system in town. I don't know, that there's much else to say on the expenses.
Chris,
You know,
can you
yes.
hold for a second? I think Tom has a question.
Yep.
Go ahead, Tom.
One question, Chris. On the anticipating expansion of more radio drive-by monitoring of water counts. One, is that still progressing as new people come online and as replacing old?
Yeah. So on the meter side of things, when Bob started, there was, I would say, at least 3,000, which is about half of our meters in the system, that were still manual reads. So
Right.
somebody was still walking up to the house, plugging into the side of your house and taking a reading that way. We are down to a handful, I would say, that are still manual reads. Everything else, we have one staff who's in a van with a laptop as he drives around the town. That laptop collects readings from all of those meters. What we're now encountering is that a lot of the meters that are in the system are now past their useful life, which is really only 10 years. So we have, approximately 3,000 meters that need to be upgraded. We were ready. We had funding to do that. We still have funding to do that. But when COVID hit last March, we stopped going into people's houses to do that work. So we've kind of held on that. We're ready to go once, the world gets back to some semblance of normalcy where, we can start interacting with the public at that close level again.
Okay, so 2 points then. Is that whatever was budgeted for that last year is just carried over till whenever they can actually do that again?
Yeah, we did have some capital funding for meters. So that's part of the funding for that. So those capital costs will carry over. We'll encumber that funding.
Okay, and secondarily, when they are driving around and with the laptop and doing the monitoring of that, is that using data or is that just simple cell signals, or are we paying for telecommunication on a data basis, or do we have a plan in the town owns or the department owns with a vendor, so that we're getting a bulk rate on that? I know one of my kids have Wi-Fi in my house, and they want to go stream the internet, and they're on data. All of a sudden, gigabits start piling up.
Yeah,
and
so
we're on a plan already, or if it doesn't even require data for that.
It doesn't even require data. There's no cell service; it's a radio read. Okay. So we just need to get in proximity of the house, and it actually populates on the computer as they're driving around as to which meters they've actually read. So before they leave a neighborhood, they'll see on the map itself that they missed one or two houses, so they can do the loop again and drive by those two houses. It's just a radio read between the van. The van has a lot of antennas on it. So
that's good to know. It's good to know that we're not, behooving to a cell phone or data vendor to do that for us. Okay.
Yeah, no, there's no cell, no AT&T or Verizon, anything like that associated with that.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hey, Chris, can I circle back real quick? In the beginning, you made a comment that the water department added more customers. So I'm just curious, where did these customers come from?
So now I had all these figures a year ago.
You can make it up.
A lot of it is commercial.
Okay.
There is a significant amount of that is commercial, but the residential population has increased. Okay. There are, right now there's a handful of subdivisions being constructed under construction that are, 15 to 20 houses apiece. Okay. So there is some increase on the residential side. A lot of the single family homes that have been knocked down and duplexes have gone up, things increase that way. So there is an increase on the residential side. A large impact is certainly, the stadium and Patriot Place. But
all right.
Yeah.
Good enough. Thank you. Thank you.
Jack's got a question.
Yeah, I actually have a couple of questions. The first one is, put your hat on that looks into the future for, let's call it 3 years. We now have a third water treatment online. Is there a fourth one in the offing? wells, you've redone a lot of wells. Is that, are we going to be seeing a new well field somewhere? Where's the new capital? Or are you done for the moment?
Bob, you want to jump in or you want me to keep going?
I suppose pipes is the obvious one, but beyond that.
I can try a little bit. In terms of wells, down off of Sprague Road, wells 4, 5, and 6 are now operating at about 30% capacity. So there's going to be future work there. We have a pipeline in the works to take the Station 2 water down to the Witch Pond treatment plant. You know, that will be a significant improvement because that right now.
But that's already paid for. That's already funded.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
No.
All right. What else were you looking for?
So I think
water tank, for example, you've got one about to come online. I don't remember what the schedule is, but
yeah, that one we're hoping for permitting and building in the spring.
Okay.
Yeah. So last year we brought forth a bond item. It ended up being $9.4 million on a bond, and it included a lot of large projects. The additional tank that's going to be up on Hill Street, which is part of that bond for this fiscal year, is planned, construction late spring through the summer, being online in the fall. The West Street water main replacement is part of that bond. That's planned for this spring, summer, and fall construction season. Again, already funded. We don't see a lot of the large capital items that we've been working through the last 12 years since the Witch Pond treatment plant started. That was the first one 12, maybe 13 years ago now. We don't see any of those large items. We do see a lot of pipe work. The pipe infrastructure under the ground, a lot of it is old. A lot of it was put in 70 years ago, 1940s through 1960s, was a lot of when that infrastructure went in. That pipe really has a life cycle of about 50 years, and we're beyond that and then some. So we know that there's AC pipe in the ground, which really just, it gets punky and spongy and just breaks, kind of unknown. And then we have water main breaks. So we've got approximately 30 miles of that pipe in the ground that all needs to be replaced. So that's going to be the ongoing capital. That pipe work is probably $1 million a mile to replace that pipe. And a lot of it's
will it be replacement or aligned or both.
There'll be a mix. The unfortunate thing is they put 6-inch pipe in the ground when they did it, because that was the standard back then. And now the standard is if you put pipe in the ground new, it should be 8 inches in diameter for a fire hydrant to be connected to it for adequate flow through a fire hydrant. So that's a lot of the residential areas that have that AC water main have a 6-inch water main through it. So a lot of that will be an upgrade to the pipe size. So it'll be new. There are some sections that will be of the line, and we'll do that as we encounter those pieces.
So the next question then comes to, you mentioned that you have about a 50% increase in the number of customers over a 10-year period or whatever it was. What about water usage, gallons per day average? Has that changed?
Seasonally, yes. In our permit, we're limited to 65 gallons per person per day for residential use. And with the conservation efforts and other, there's less commercial right now, which is a different factor, but we're running about 54 gallons per person per day.
And that hasn't changed really.
It's actually come down from previous years.
So not sprinkling lawns has made a difference, maybe.
That drives us up in the summer months, yes. But
Um,
overall, year by year, we're doing about the same as we have for the past few years.
You know how much you pump, and you also know how much you bill. How much is lost? And you've been tracking that, I'm sure. Has that changed?
As soon as I can get my latest numbers for this year, it's looking like between water not sold and water not pumped that we saved about, my staff is estimating right now about 60 million gallons less for this current year. So I'm hoping along with that the unaccounted for water that we've been searching for goes down also.
Yeah, we hit a spike a couple years ago. We definitely spiked a couple of years ago. We in the leak detection program that we've been doing we do it twice a year, and then kind of intermittently throughout the season as well. A couple of years ago, we calculated probably 100 million gallons of water we lost in leaks in the system. So that's water main breaks. That's sometimes it's services that are leaking. It's major breaks, it's small breaks, it's stuff that's the worst ones are usually ones that are near a body of water or a stream, because the water has a real easy place to go away without being seen. So with all those repairs we've done, we're starting to tighten up the system. And, I know Bob's probably a week or two away from having a pretty good number on our 2020 unaccounted for water.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Chris? Okay, Chris, you can go on, proceed.
All right. We'll jump into sewer. So similar to water.
Can I interrupt? Sorry, Larry.
Oh.
So just real quick, we didn't talk about the debt service, which was the bottom line, right?
Sure.
Just a quick question. So the interest rate on the debt service, this may be a question for George. We typically go in pretty conservative on that, right? So we just, because that we don't have the interest rate yet, we put in 3%. Does that sound right?
Correct.
Do we know how sensitive that final number is to that? So, 1% is not implausible. Do we know if we ended up getting 1% on that, what that would do to these numbers?
One of the things, through you, Larry, one of the things that we do every time you go out to do a bond issuance is we go through, we have a company by the name of Hilltop Securities. And what we do is we ask them to predict out for the time period that we're in at this point, how much money it's going to be, for whatever the amount of the bond issuance is, and what do they think we're going to get as the interest rate. Usually they will come in slightly higher to adjust for if on the day of the actual sale it's cheaper, and they you don't want to get caught by surprise and then have to go up. We did the same thing last year. It will come down. I think we're already at, like all-time lows. I think that from the 3, it'll probably come down, several fractions of a percentage point. You don't know unless things start to go up again, but we're aiming at March at the moment to be done approximately the same time as we were last year when we did the last bond issuance. So I think it's going to be pretty close, but I think you'll probably see it more in the 2s than actually 3s. They do come in high to make so that nobody gets caught off guard.
So what's the materiality on that, I guess, is my question, George. So if it came in at 2%, like how much difference would that make to these numbers? And I know you probably can't do that off the top of your head.
I would have to have actually run it, but last year, I think we started off at 3, and I think we saved maybe $150,000, $200,000. But there was I think there was it came down substantially, but not, I mean, it wasn't something that was, it gave us a little bit of money. I don't have the number in my head, but it'll be something that will probably, it'll reduce the water budget down a little bit, but nothing.
Okay. If you could just
going to blow anything away.
Yeah. Just do me the favor of running a number. It almost doesn't matter what number it is, just like 2%.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I don't think, remember, we caught last year, I think we came in at 2.6 or 2.7, something to that effect.
Okay. I thought it was lower for some reason.
That was approximate. They said that was the lowest number since 1870 or something like that.
Okay.
And I don't think you're going to go a hell of a lot lower than that right now. So again, it'll probably run it down. I can ask Hilltop to run a couple of different scenarios, whatever. But for now, we just put it in so that we're not, before the end of the year, we'll have the number, but it'll probably come down.
Okay, good to know. Thanks.
All right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sure. And just something that kind of impacts, both the water and the sewer budgets. So in May, the water commissioners will vote for any rate increase that they see. We take these budgets and they go out to a consultant. HDR is a firm that we've used in the past to set our rates and do a rate study for us on these two accounts. They'll take into account anything that's proposed here, and they'll look at what that rate increase should be. And that was part of the directive and the initiative of the board was to, keep these budgets as level funded as we could, really reduce the capital, coming out of these budgets beyond the bonding that we already have in place, so that rate increase, for FY22 is not what it was planned out to be. We had set previously that it was going to be, 6%, 6%, and then it would start to drop down over time. The plan and the initiative from the board is to reduce that so that it's not a 6% rate increase this next fiscal year, that it's, whether it's 4 or 2 or whatever that number is from the consultant, to reduce that rate and keep it as low as we can going into the next fiscal year. So with that on the sewer side of things specifically, the salary line items, all this staff is shared with the water enterprise account. So it's all the same people that work for the water and the sewer department. We don't have anybody separated out. So the water funds 90% of the budgets and the sewer funds 10% of the budgets for those salary line items. So you'll see similar changes. Actually, it should be the exact same percentages changed on the salary side on the sewer that it was on the water. As far as the expenses go, pretty minor. There's actually, we actually dropped the expenses by 0.6%. A lot of that is looking at some of the line items that probably could have come out a couple of years ago. Something in here, there is an IMA plant design fee that's been in this as a $25 line item. That plant is the one we're part of with the sewer district with Mansfield and Norton. That plant construction is complete. That was funding that was probably put aside prior to the district being formed. Now we have it assessed. The regional sewer assessment includes anything that the sewer district would need funding wise is included in that line item. So that $25,000 can go away. Beyond that, there's really some minor changes in there. Legal services, again, when we're joining the MFN and working through that IMA. There are some significant legal services. We have not seen use of that over the last few years. There's some stuff that's ongoing, but nothing major. So that's a line item that we've reduced, 58% to help meet the initiative and the guidance of the water and sewer commissioners.
Hey, Chris, if there's a line for technology improvement, I'm just curious, what are you upgrading computers, or are you just upgrading software?
We have been working, and we actually have some capital funding to get the sewer system on our SCADA system.
Okay.
So our water system is run, can be run completely remotely. We can collect all of our data that way. We can see what pumps are running, chemicals are flowing. We've never had that on the sewer side. We have 6 lift stations in town, and they flow gravity into it, and then they pump them out. And we have a meter that somebody goes around and does a daily reading and a visit of, to actually take that reading. So we're working to get those systems on SCADA so that we have remote access and reporting capability from that infrastructure.
Okay. The reason I ask is both water and sewer cut it by about $2,500. So it's about $5,000 reduction. So I'm just curious if it's, if it's a critical software, are you cutting too much?
No, I think we've done a lot with capital funding.
Okay.
On the water side, we have PLC upgrades that we've done this year. Part of that was due to the new plant coming online. The rest of the system needed to be upgraded to meet what we were going to put into the new plant. So a lot of the work we've done, through capital funding that way. And the sewer side of things, the technology improvements, there are some things we do use it for the GIS system that in the field technology, we use it for that. But again, we haven't seen a big expense on that in the last few years. So we thought that was something we could reduce down to help the rates for next fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
I was going to ask if you just elaborate whether or not there's been a noticeable increase in flow rates this year with COVID and more people working from home, kids being at home from school, whether that's been an increase in necessary chemicals or treatment during all this, and if that'd be projected for another year as long as this pandemic goes on.
I think we've seen it kind of balance out. We've probably seen it. We have seen an increase on the residential side because people are home. People aren't traveling for vacation. They're not going to school. They're not going to work. So we've seen an increase in that flow, but we've seen it kind of balance out on the commercial side where, the restaurants are in full capacity. Hotels aren't, at full capacity by any stretch. So we've seen it kind of balance out on that end. So I think our numbers are good as far as chemical goes, as far as, what we expect to be pumping next year. I think we've looked at that and taken the world into account as far as where we are right now.
Okay, I was bringing that to reiterate what we brought up in our meeting the other day was I think you had said that the business side is negligible, but with kids not being in school, they're now using flow in a more billable environment, whereas in town business buildings it wasn't. So there may be an uptick there.
Yeah, so on the revenue side, that is certainly something that we've seen where we don't bill water to other town buildings. So,
right.
That's something that's built into the rate structure. You're going to pay it out of the general fund or you're going to pay it out on the rate. So we've, the Water and Sewer Commission has left it, in the rate. So with people being home, all those students using water at home, people have probably seen an increase in their water bill. I think pretty understandably that, if you had 2 kids that were going to school every day, using bathrooms and, eating lunch there that are now home, that increase is seen in that, water bill that you've got every quarter coming in.
Thank you. I just thought that was useful to everybody to get that understanding too. Great, thank you.
Okay, Chris, do you have anything else you want to add for the water and sewer department?
Not at this time.
Okay, any further questions from AdCom on water and sewer? Nope, I think we're good. So Chris, you can move on to Department of Public Works.
Okay. If we want, we can take the easy ones first.
Whatever works for you.
Sure. Why don't we do snow and ice? Snow and ice is snow and ice gets level funded every year. With that, we don't want to increase that budget because it takes away from other accounts. It's an unknown, and at the state level, it's something that we're able to, if we need to overspend that budget, that's the one that we're able to overspend with local approval. So that's something that I believe George has reserves set aside and earmarked for, bad winters. That dollar amount, George, is probably in the 250 to 300 range, maybe.
Yeah, you essentially hit it on the head. Maybe just not full on the snow and ice. This is, as Chris just mentioned, this is one of the only accounts that you can actually spend into a negative with town approval, as he mentioned. So there is no reserve set aside for it, but what is essentially happening is they want you to keep the level that you're funding the same. And then what you're doing is you are raising the amount of the overage on the next year's budget. So this eliminates this thing of running back and forth or over funding it and not really needing it, having to run back to a special town meeting. By the end of the year, you sort of know where you are, and then you raise it in the next budget. So for this year, I don't have a reserve for it, but what we have done is we looked back for the last, I think I did 6-7 years, and the amount was, it averaged a negative of 288. So we set aside in the budget that we currently have, 288 is in there. Now, if we don't use it, obviously, we lower that, and then that gives us more room on next year's budget. Anyway, if that answers the question.
So to that point, it's all the same. Where it was 216,300 in FY21, and it's proposed to be the same 216,300 in FY22.
So, hey, Chris, given the lack of snow this winter, we are looking good, right? As far as the expenses. I don't want to jinx it. We could get nailed.
It's not even February yet, Larry.
I know.
Don't do that.
Are you aware that as we speak, it's snowing?
Yeah.
I withdraw my statement. Go ahead, Chris.
So, I don't know if anybody has any other questions on snow and ice.
No, it's straightforward. We know it.
Street lighting, 424.
Okay.
So street lighting, this one again is we're gonna level fund it at 110,000. Looking back, if you look at the prior year expense of 2020, that was something where we had done the LED conversion, submitted all the paperwork to National Grid. and then their process to actually convert in their system so that we start paying the lower rate took approximately 18 months to 24 months to do. In that time frame, we stopped paying all the bills. They actually stopped sending bills for those accounts. And what happened 2 years ago was they finally caught up and sent us a bill, for the prior 2 years. We actually had something at town meeting in the warrant where we had to bring the prior year National Grid bills to town meeting for approval to actually pay those bills. So, we're confident that the 110,000 will cover the electrical cost, any maintenance cost. It does include not only the streetlights, but it does include any of the flasher signs, the traffic signals, Mechanic and Oak, Mechanic and Chestnut, any of the school zone signs that are connected to power is run and paid for under this account as well.
Chris, I have a question. I know that the last 2 fiscal year, I had to present the warrant article at town meeting. So are you anticipating another article this year, or what you have should be enough to pay for it?
No, we should be enough for the current fiscal year.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And what we will see, and this is always on Tom's mind. When we did the LED conversion program, we financed that over a 5-year term. This FY22 will be the last payment of that 5-year term, and that's a $51,000 payment.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I was here and then off and then on again for this 5-year escapade. I think I asked at the initial, are we going to be able to have at the end of this ride an evaluation to show everybody that we are in a better off situation, that the cost is being met out by the savings?
Yeah, we'll be able to pull our National Grid bills from the last 2 years since they did the paperwork and the conversion on their end, and we'll have 3 years of records of what we're actually getting charged. And that goes to the maintenance side of things. The LED bulbs. Initially, that first year we had what I would say was significant repair costs, but there is a 10% defect expectancy with those, so we probably hit that 10%. But we haven't seen that the last 2 years since we've hit that mark. So we'll be able to go back, look back to what our electrical use was. This used to be a $145,000, $150,000 line item. The majority of that, was the electrical cost.
Right. I remember Randy and everybody else trying to, work through, and then you said 3 years of bills that was misbilled, and to be able to get a straight number was always kind of like we're waiting for National Grid to sort this whole thing out to get a real final understanding as to that we got to where we're intended to get to. I guess that's what I want to find out. Did we go through all this process and get to where we wanted to, or even better? Or I would hate to think that we're just treading water and going through all that.
Yeah, I mean, what I can say is that in that 110,000 that we have budgeted,
Right.
51 of that is the finance payment, and then we're roughly $35,000 for the electrical cost, which used to be alone was $120,000 just on the electricity side. So there's a significant savings that we're already seeing there, and that's something we'll definitely look at, going into this last year of that project.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Brad, do you have a question? You need to unmute. Brad, you need to unmute. Hey, Brad.
There we go. Are we good
Okay,
now?
you're good. You're good.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I was just getting off the main screen. A quick question. I was just looking at the street lighting then. So it says LED, replacements. Has that been completed?
Yes. Yeah. So that was completed 2017.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So no more, decrease in where it is now. It's going to be no more gains from new LED. Okay.
There are some neighborhoods, there's, a small amount of fixtures that, were new developments, not under our ownership when we did the project.
Yep.
And, unfortunately the spec for those lights at the time that they got put in was the old spec. So we do have some fixtures that are out there that will convert. It'll be minimal.
Understand.
And really
Yep.
not much we're going to see in the budget reduction.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
Any other questions on lighting? I guess we're good, Chris.
All right. Let's do 430 solid waste disposal and collection. So this is actually a combination of two accounts from FY21. This involves the landfill, two of which we have. One over, the big one is over on East Belcher Road, over near the compost site, which now has a solar field on it. And then there's another smaller landfill out behind the state hospital, actually under the basketball court over by the Payson Road playground. So we do have two landfills in town. The smaller one is pretty minimal cost. It's an annual report to the state that says nothing's changed. The larger one with the solar field, the majority of that operating cost has been passed off to NRG, who's the operator of the solar field. They have taken over, a lot of the torches that are on that field, that actually spark and take care of any landfill gas that's, going up into the atmosphere. And then there's ground monitoring as well, that they are taking care of. There is a small increase in that line item to take care of some of the stuff that's outside of the fenced-in area. So we do have to maintain and do some reporting on the landfill outside of the fenced-in area for the solar field. So I did add in a small engineering line item back into the budget, for FY22 or 22. The other piece of this is hazardous waste day is a large component of this budget. So every spring we host a hazardous waste day for residents to bring old mercury light bulbs, tube light bulbs, oil-based paint. There's a whole list of stuff that we offer to take once a year. And that event has actually been very successful in the amount of material we've collected. And, we've seen an increase in residents dropping material off. And we've actually been spending more than the $15,000 that's been budgeted, the last couple of years. So we are, looking to increase that. Actually, we're increasing that line item for hazardous waste disposal up to 17.5 from the 15 that it's been budgeted at. And something to that, we've been working with actually Mansfield and Norton on a regional collection day. So this year, April, I think 24th, maybe, I think it's the last Saturday in April, we're actually going to do a regional collection where you can actually sign up and have material collected at your doorstop. Or you can actually drive stuff over to Mansfield. It's going to be the collection, the drop-off site. So that's kind of a combination of what we've done in the past. This past spring, a year ago, when COVID hit, we canceled the drop-off and did a doorstep collection. We had 180 residents take advantage of that program. And so we have funding set aside. There's a little bit of grant funding for the Tri-Town effort, but everything will come back to us out of this budget. So again, this is with the combination of those two budgets, the collection and the disposal, we're actually dropping down, almost 4% on a decrease.
Chris, where do they ship the hazardous waste?
That's up to them. I would have to pull we do get a copy of the manifold. I would have to pull it to see where they're disposing of it. So the last few years we've used the company. They were a clean venture and they've merged with ACV and Viro. is the company we've been using the last couple of years.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, while we're on the subject on trash and solid waste disposal, I just want to run something by you. I spoke to Keegan briefly about this, and in regards to the town negotiating for trash service for the residential side. I know years ago, before Keegan, it was something the town would negotiate for everybody, and then we just pay for it. And the reason I ask is, I think the town, due to its size and collective bargaining, you may be able to get a better deal for the residential, for the homeowners. And I was just wondering, do you guys have any plans in the near future to maybe negotiate for the homeowners?
That has not been something that has been asked of me to do or to look into.
Okay.
It is something I've done in the past. And I think that's a political question that
Exactly. So I think I'm just posing it, but I'll talk to the Board of Selectmen.
Hey, Larry.
Yeah.
Larry,
Yes.
I think, and I don't have it in front of me, but for coincidentally, I had to look I was filling out some paperwork for our annual disclosure.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that the current contract has been extended another 3 years. So I think it goes out a few more years anyway. So even if it's the intent, you already have an existing contract in place.
The town does not have a contract.
No, the town,
Yeah.
this is before you, there was a previous town manager. There was, I don't have all the details, but it blew up, and then suddenly everybody was told that you are on your own to get your own trash service. That's my understanding.
Oh,
And
so you're
it's
not speaking of the one with Dooley that we currently have.
When you say we, are you talking about the town of Foxborough? Or are you talking about the
Yes.
residents of Foxborough? I'm talking about the residents of Foxborough.
Okay, I misunderstood you. I'm
That's
sorry.
fine.
I thought
That's fine.
you were talking about the trash contract.
No. I know
that.
I know the deal between Dooley or United Management, whatever it's called now, UMM, with the town. That's okay. I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying.
Okay.
If,
all right. I'm
if the
sorry. I
town,
misunderstood
that's okay.
you. All right.
Go ahead, Jack.
Last week, Chris and I and others on our committee met, and one of the questions I asked was the potential for expanding the scope of hazardous waste collection to include things that people now have difficulty getting rid of, specifically tires, automobile tires, and old electronics. And I don't know whether you've had any time to think about that further. Probably not. I know you've got other things on your plate.
I will say honestly, I did not. I did not. I do have thoughts on it, and I think those would be, whether it's added to the Hazardous Waste Day event or a separate event, something great that we could do to add, a benefit to the residents in town. I did not look at any pricing or anything like that as far as what that might cost us.
6 or 8 years ago, through the Lions Club, we ran electronic recycling days. We did that for several years. In fact, it was done at the highway garage, but that didn't continue. But meanwhile, the need is still there.
Yeah, and I know I've seen it, and it where you set it up and you set it up through a third party. They bring their truck, and the residents pay per item. So if it's a TV or a tire or whatever, they're basically handing over cash. We'll organize it, and then it's up to the residents that need to dispose of that to come down and participate and kind of fund it out of pocket. So that maybe that's the way we do it. The first year is to see what the interest is, and then we get a value and what that expense might be moving forward, and maybe it's something we can add into the budget down the road. and maybe some of it's advertising, what some of the other events are happening in town. I know, there is one or two organizations that do bike recycling events, electronic events, and maybe it's just helping that coordination so that people know that there are those options out there, besides what we offer for the Hazardous Waste Day.
One of the things that struck me when we ran the electronic recycling, it must be 5-10 years ago now. The first year we got huge amounts of material, but what was happening is everything that people have stored in their basement over the preceding 5 years all came out. So the second and third year, it was much lower.
Yep. Sure.
Okay, I guess we're done with trash for now.
All right. So the last one up is 410, which is the DPW Public Works budget. So what's included in this? This is highway, tree and park, and equipment maintenance. What you'll see throughout the budget is reallocation from one division to the next. We have taken line items that were in highway for building maintenance or electricity and put them into the administrative section of the budget. Stuff for vehicle repair. We had vehicle parts, vehicle repair, broken out per division. We have taken that and put that for the most part all under equipment maintenance. That supervisor is the one that's responsible for all those repairs. He's the one that's responsible for approving those invoices when parts come in. So he's the one that should have that line item kind of under his control. So, we've reallocated a lot of those line items on the expense side. So you'll see, a line item that's been zeroed out in one section, and then it's been, doubled in another. And that's kind of the reallocation between the divisions themselves. The other thing that we did on the salary side, this goes back to a year ago where we had approval to add a mechanic and add a staff member to the DPW. When COVID hit, all those additional positions were pulled. Similar to the water and sewer side, we've had some people leave for other jobs. And we look at the department and kind of try to figure out what's the best next step for us. Is there a way to restructure? Is there, in this case, I took one of the labor positions from the highway that had been vacated and moved it over to the equipment maintenance division. So you'll see a decrease in the highway salary, but you'll see an increase in the equipment maintenance salary. So that's something, working with the supervisors, working with the staff. We were comfortable at the time, reallocating that position in that body. So there's no increase. I'm gaining my fourth mechanic. I am losing a body in the highway side, but there's no increase in the staffing. I will be back for that highway position. I fully understand that FY22 is not the year for that extra body. But I will be back looking for that, probably FY23. Beyond that, the salaries are all union contract based. So they're all negotiated with the town manager, board of selectmen approval for salaries. So that includes their increases. And then on the expenses, beyond, kind of moving things around, we have seen, I'm a firm believer that we need to increase training for staff. We are actually seeing the DLS for the state and our insurance company, Maya, is doing a lot with the OSHA regulations for our group. And something that's going to be coming is, are we following the OSHA guidelines? We have a list of SOPs that we need to start putting into place in writing. We are kind of in the same line with all the other towns, and majority of the towns that are just seeing that this is something that we need to start doing. So, that training, that development is something that's going to need to be increased over the next few years. Something that I did add into the budget that went away a few years ago, I think someone inadvertently, is an engineering and architect services. So, everything that we do over the last few years has been out of capital funding. So if it's roadway, it's been Chapter 90 or meals tax. And we haven't had, even a small budget to hire an engineer to, look at a drainage problem if we're not able to get to it, or an intersection redesign. So I've added a small, $10,000 line item back into the budget. It was there several years ago. I've added that back in. Beyond that, there's, really minimal. I think I'm at I think I got to 2.5% on the increase on the DPW budget.
Any questions for Chris on DPW? Anyone? Okay, everybody is good. I do have a question, Chris, and it has nothing to do with DPW, but it's more on the CIP request.
Yep.
It's just one item, and I think Bill might have mentioned to you. I just want a clarification. Last year there was a CIP request for a sweeper, five years owned to rent, and it was like $55,000 a year.
Yep.
And then this year you also request another one, but it's $51,230. So my question is this a second sweeper, or is this the same one from last year?
No, it's the same one.
Okay.
When we originally set that number, the 55, it hadn't been finalized yet what that lease agreement was going to be.
Okay.
So the number actually is lower. It is the 51,000 number is the number.
So this is year 2 payment, right? Year 3, year 2?
2 or 3.
2 or 3. Okay, that's okay.
I think it's year 3.
So last year we paid $51,230 instead of $55.
Yes.
And
yeah, for the lease agreement. Yeah,
okay.
It was that same number, that 51.
Okay. All right. That's my CIP question.
And Larry, if I may, one thing hidden away in that budget is Chris is going to be able to move forward with some street reconfiguration projects as well. In our meeting, he talked about the, what was it, Cohasset and East Street, Chris?
Yep. Yeah, so there's 2 big road projects that we have in design right now. East Street at Cohasset. A few years ago, it was identified as a safety concern, where that Y intersection that's there is not the best configuration for line of sight. If you're heading towards Mansfield, you have to look back over your shoulder to look under the railroad tracks. If you're going under the railroad tracks from East Street, you don't have a line of sight for the crosswalk that's there. So we have that in design now and are waiting on a final draft of that design. That's something that we're looking at using our Chapter 90 funding for this upcoming fiscal year. And then the other one is East Belcher Road, from Spring Street down to the bottom of the hill where the new River Ridge subdivision is being constructed. So that's a street that was actually identified before I got here by Roger Hill as needing to be widened out. As you get towards the peak of that hill close to Spring Street, you narrow down with a large piece of ledge and trees on your left side, really narrowing down to about 16 feet in width, which, with some of the vehicles that travel that road, the size of those is not the safest place to be. So we are working on that design right now with an engineering firm to do a widening over there, remove that ledge, the trees, and actually do a drainage project associated with that. So we actually just received a cost estimate on that. When we're gonna work on trying to put that together, either FY 2022 or 23 to get that project done as well.
One thing I'd say is that should Foxborough have the bandwidth, at some point they're going to want to think about, as a town, we're going to want to think about how we can put some more money towards some of the roads and streets in town, because there's a lot of projects out there that, everyone's fighting for the money, I'm sure, schools and other budget askers here, but we got a lot in the works that I don't think gets the money for the DPW. Thank you.
Okay. Jack?
Yeah, Chris, I suspect you've gone through this, but have you put any thought to, while you're tearing up the street at the intersection of East and Cohasset, replacing the AC water line going under the bridge, which is right next to it, with either cast iron or PVC?
Yeah, we have definitely looked at that. We are looking at the utilities there because we know we have a drainage issue there as well, where the drainage pipe that
it used to be.
Yeah, but yeah, the drainage pipe that leaves that underpass is a 12-inch drain line, and there are 4 12-inch drain lines that enter that same manhole. So there's 4 times the potential flow going in that the outflow can handle, which is why that floods every time we get, half an inch of rain. So we are looking at the utilities at the same time. We're pulling those into that intersection design.
Okay. On the discussion earlier on Belcher Street, if you think back a few years, that ledge was on both sides of the road. So if it's narrow now, it was narrower 25 years ago.
Go ahead, Paul. I see you.
Yeah, Chris, is there also a subset? I seem to remember you talking last year about there's some sidewalks you have to make ADA compliant every year. Is that true? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah. So we have working with an engineering firm with Beta Group done a self-assessment in town, and what that involved was actually doing an inventory of all of the intersections in town. Did they meet the ADA requirements as far as ramps go, slope requirements, and we have to allocate, as part of that self-assessment and plan moving forward, we have to allocate a certain dollar amount, a certain percentage of our road paving budget to do that work. We're actually lucky that we're able to do a lot of that internally. Our highway department can handle all of that work in itself. So instead of paying a contractor, $36 a foot for a handicap ramp, a square foot, we're able to do that at a lower cost with our own staff. But that is something that Lance and I have been reviewing with our highway supervisor and actually have some plan in place to begin this upcoming construction season.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Stephanie. You need to unmute.
Hi, Chris. This is just more of a comment. I'll try to save some of my questions for when I hear your presentation at one of the selectmen meetings. But just listening tonight, what I wanted to come into, because I think for me, it's good to listen sometimes twice, and then you hear things and different questions that are answered by AdCom, then helps you understand some of it. 2 things. First of all, the money for roads and for the OPEB, obviously has been cut this year because of the COVID. So it's just kudos to you for trying to go forward for the projects that need to get done, just because we know that's going to, be a little bit of a deficit money that normally would have been able to come your way. And also, I just wanted to say thank you for, as a department head, being understanding of, I know there's things that you wanted, and the fact it was nice to hear you tonight say, listen, this is something I really want, but I understand it's just a hard time. And so just, it was nice to see you prioritize your budget, and, just in a tough year. So it's more of a comment than a question. Just want you to know that it was definitely, as far as I'm concerned, definitely noticed that you put a lot, not that anybody wouldn't, or you wouldn't have if it wasn't a COVID year, but that you took the time to really prioritize and, what was most important to you, and appreciative that you were able to see that there was something that you really wanted this year, but it just wasn't maybe the right time. So more of a comment than a question.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Anything else to add, Chris?
I think I'm good.
Any further questions from anyone from AdCom? Comments? No.
Larry, I just don't. I think we covered pretty much everything we covered in our regular meeting between John and Jack and I, and Chris and Bob, and once again the other people standing in the shadows to make it all work, brought it all together. This is, we didn't hear anything in our meeting that Chris didn't present here, so there's no surprises here. It's pretty straightforward and within the parameters that were set as guidelines for submission. So congratulations to your department on all three phases.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bob. And I think Lance was the third person. Which I haven't met.
He's the silent partner right now.
Okay, all right. So
he's just soaking it all in.
so thank you to you and everybody in your department, your division, for coming tonight. It was helpful. So I'm sure if we have any questions, Tom or the liaison will get back to you. But thank you for coming tonight.
All right. Thank you.
Good night.
Right.
Okay, next on the agenda. Well, next, it's not on the agenda, but it's I asked George to come in to just talk to us to clarify a few things. And but George, before you start, I just want to thank you for the nice stipend you gave AdCom. I'm sure everybody's really happy, and please don't take it away. But anyway, George, I believe you're here tonight to talk about the treatment of COLA in the budget for this year. And the budget book, I have to say, is very nice, very easy to read. It was clear, and I just want to say thank you, Marie, thank you, George, for getting the books to us on time. George, all yours.
Hi, can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay, so I think I've already talked to Paul on this, probably for about a half hour the other day while I was eating a cheeseburger. But I think to maybe a few words of clarification on the new line that's in there called reserve for COLA, or it's actually reserved for. I'm trying to think of the title now for the payrolls or whatever. It's down at the very bottom. It's right next to the normal reserve fund that you have. So what this is, and since I had the time to talk to Paul about it, okay, I've come to the conclusion I know a little bit about where some of the confusion is. So let me backtrack a little bit. I'm a little long-winded on it, but then everybody can follow what I'm saying, hopefully.
George, before you start, can you at least mention the benefit of AdCom, the page number where this line is, because I think not everybody is aware of the question.
Well, unfortunately, I'm not holding the book in my hand, but it
Okay.
should be at the very right in or around where your insurances are at the end of the budget.
Okay, I said 172 to page 172 to 174.
Yes. Okay. And when I mentioned that your regular reserve fund is near there, that's the same reserve fund you've had for the last since the beginning of time. So essentially, what this comes down to is this: in past incarnations, Larry, every year what the town has done is this: they would go out, you would set a budget. And I'm going to make up a thing. I've been using the same thing with Paul. I'll make myself the bad guy here so that it doesn't look like I'm picking on anybody. But let's say my budget had $100,000 in it for payroll. Okay. And let's also say I'm in a union and there's a union contract. What the town was doing in past incarnations is you would fund the $100,000 and then come back sometime after the town meeting was over and the budget was already set. Come back to a subsequent town meeting, usually a special, okay, and then take the money that whatever it was, whether it was 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever, put it back into the budget via town meeting. And then that was the way it was funded. Now, what was the problem with that? As everybody says, when the manager would come out and say, well, let's stick with a 2% budget, well, that's whatever, you'd have a 2% budget. Now you come back and whatever the amount was is now on top of the 2%. Okay. So last year, early on, and this was a confusion for Paul, so I'm going to mention it because some of you may remember it and some of you might not. But initially, we tried to fund the potential increases for these COLAs in each one of the lines of the budget, okay? And with the thought in mind that, let's just say, again, I'll use myself as the bad guy, but let's say I came out and I put in 5%, okay, on this $100,000. So now I got 105 in there, but I don't have a contract or my contract isn't done yet. Well, that's okay because I can't spend that money because I'm contractually bound by this union contract, okay? But at least if we had put the money in, the money was there. And then if let's say it came in at 2, we close that money out at the end of the year, it becomes free cash again. At that time, the finance, or the AdCom wasn't too keen on the way that was. And we ended up coming back and taking it back out, if you guys remember this. But Bill came back in a little later on and removed all the COLA increases that were already built in.
And George, can I interrupt just to put that in a timeline context? The original budget book we got, which I happen to have here, I can show everybody,
right.
Would have had it in there, right?
Right. And then what ended up happening is and of course, I mean, there were like 6 incarnations of this thing because I think Bill and I and Marie came in, I don't know how many times last year, especially we were almost done. And then the COVID thing came in and we had to do 2 or 3 more and everything was removed and everything. So I'm not sure which one it was that we finally took the money out or recanted it, but we did. Okay. Which I think caused a little confusion on the part of, pardon me, that's my phone ringing. But it did cause some confusion on the part of maybe some of the people on the AdCom because they said, well, I thought we had it in there. Well, that was an attempt last year to try to do this a little better than we were doing before, but it didn't pan out the way we wanted it. So now what have we done this year? Maria's created a line called Reserve for COLA. I can't even think of the title of the line. And what she's doing is taking the money that we would have gone for at the annual or at the next special, let's say, put all the money in there. And then what will ultimately happen is once each of these various contracts is approved, signed, sealed, and delivered, okay, what will end up happening is by a series of town manager transfers, which you folks are in on towards the end of the year, along with the Board of Selectmen, the movement will be made from that account to the various lines that it belongs in once all the contracts are approved, or the ones in question are approved. What does this supposedly do? Well, for one thing, it prevents us having to come back for another special town meeting because the money already exists in there, and now it's just a matter of moving it. For example, this year, Bill mentioned earlier in the evening, if anybody remembers, we're going to have a special before the annual to move some money for the current 21. We couldn't get to it this year because with the COVID and everything, and then it was all put off. This will prevent us from having to do that next year. But more to the point, I think what this does better than anything is, I think I mentioned earlier that the way we've been doing it is we set a certain groundwork, whether it's 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever it is. Then we set the budget, as we're doing it now, by the way. Then we come back to a special town meeting and we take whatever the amount is and plop it back into the budget after the fact. So the question is, if you at least put it in the bottom line of your budget, it is part of the overall budget. And when we start talking numbers right now, even though it hasn't been delineated into the lines that it belongs to yet, because these contracts haven't been approved, you at least have it as part of your overall budget. And at least you know moving forward, wait a minute, that was already included, okay? So whatever the bottom line is right now, if they say we're up 3.2 or 2.2 or whatever that amount is, again, I don't have the book in front of me. Well, that number is also part of that 3.2, rather than a artificially low number that you don't even know what it is, and then coming back later putting it in. So I think this is an attempt, as Bill and I have been talking, to do a little bit better with the budget, or at least make it more clarified. If that
George,
makes
George,
sense.
can I ask you a question for clarification? I think
Sure.
I know maybe where some of the confusion is coming.
Sure.
So that 193,000, I take it that's 2% of the two open contracts, or is it 2% of everybody in town that has COLA? That's my first question.
All right, for the most part, okay, I believe the vast majority of it is for those
the two
Right.
open contracts.
Right.
So
Now-
my second question is, it's along the same line, is now other departments, the one I'm making up, let's say department, I don't know, let's say
Use me
let's
as
say
fine.
okay,
Yeah.
your department.
All right.
Since
Yeah.
there's no contract going on, so does
Right.
your department have the 2% COLA built in your current budget?
No. In this particular case, okay, we would have like a number of what they call steel workers, because that's the contract most of those people are under. That contract has not been negotiated or approved yet, okay? So the COLA is residing in that line that's in question. Once that the contract is approved, sometime, I'm hopefully towards the end of the year, like May, when you guys do all those internal transfers, or they call them town manager transfers here. Okay. Once that happens, you'll move the money from that 100 and what was it, 160, 190, and move it, a portion of that, into the finance department to the various lines that would be affected by that particular contract. So that's what's happening.
Hey, George, this is Dan Peterson. I got two questions for you.
Sure.
One is that exact, or I guess my question is there a chance that is it estimated? It could be a little low, could be a little high. Is there a chance we have to go back to a special town meeting anyway to appropriate, say, a couple thousand more or whatever? That's the first question.
Okay. So the question number one, anyway, let's start with that. There's no way you can say exactly what it's going to be until they're done with the contract. It can be estimated up pretty clearly, okay, to say, well, what are they kind of sticking with? And I mean, I don't want to come out here and speak for them, because remember, this is negotiations, okay? But let's say there's a pretty good concept that we're going to use, let's say X% for now, not to make a thing. So you go with the X%. Now, let's say it goes up a little bit, hopefully within the budget as it stands. If, like you were saying, if it's a couple of $1,000s, we'll probably have the ability to do it internally anyway. Okay. But let's say for some reason, and I'm gonna go way out on a limb and say that instead of, let's say, 1% that we were thinking it was going to be, it ended up being 7%. Okay. The point would be this, that yeah, you would probably have to go back to to another town meeting to fix it. But that would be something like where you were way off the reservation and not really knowing where you are, where you were starting. But let's say this, given what the COLA is predicted to be, you're going to be 99% of the way home doing this. So at least the budget that you're putting in for 22 will be reflective right now of what it's supposed to be. And if it is off, it's going to be off so minutely that it isn't, it's not going to be something that would be, is going to make under normal conditions, is going to make some kind of a real aberration. If does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay. All right. One follow up to that is, say we have, steel workers this year for the COLA, and it's the police the next year, or teachers, whatever. This specific line item, is it going to be cyclical in cost? Like next year, is it going to be 400 and then 2, or do we have any idea of what this specific budget is going to be? Is it going to be up and down? Is it going to be flat, pretty much around 200,000? Does it matter? Depend on how many employees we have? Can you give me an idea of that?
Well, in answer to that, I think what you're going to find is it will go up and down, most largely dependent on how many open contracts do you have at any one point in time, okay? Because keep this in mind. Let's say we had 10 contracts, okay, and 9 of them are all done, and they're done for the next 3 years. Then there's no question at the time that you're doing the budgeting what the COLA is going to be, because it's already built in. If you follow what I'm saying, okay, it's built. Those contracts are done. So the one, the place where it isn't known would be on the contract that has not been negotiated yet. Okay, so yes, you're right. It can go up, it can go down, independence with. And by the way, yes, if there were some new people that came in, or a number of people that left. But I think in that case, you're going to see that that would be more minute, because we're not hiring on a large scale basis, and we're not firing on it. We're mostly replacing, and I think, as even Chris mentioned a little more, we try to come in a little bit lower but I don't think you're going to see a major kaboom in that area as far as personnel. I think what it would be, the thing that would drive it up and down would be, where are we? How many contracts are open? And what type of year are you going to have? And let me say this without,
I guess my question is like, so if we have three, for example, you said, oh, so we have 9 contracts, they're set for 3 years, so we're good. And then, the next 2 years we have only 2 contracts and only 2 contracts. So this line item's going to be lower. And then when we hit that next 3rd year, it's going to go back up, right?
Right, absolutely. Okay, absolutely.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, though, in the second part is that's exactly what's happening right now, okay, without that line in there. The only difference being is that what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to reach into free cash and I'm going to take it out in year 1, and maybe it was 200,000. And then the next year it's going to be 400,000. And then the next year it's going to be 100. You're doing the exact same thing. The difference being is you're not really taking it into account in the bottom line of your budget. And you're also sort of, you're also making it so you have to go back to a special town meeting. And then there's usually a holdup if you can't get to that meeting, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess we're just calling it out now and trying to fund it a little more evenly. I get it. I just wanted to see, basically based on your comment of if there was 9, whether it would skyrocket one year, and just, if that is in a year or two, we understand when we see it, okay, we had a lot of contracts up, we understand why this is a lot higher and it should level back down next year.
You're absolutely right. And you're absolutely on track. And again, I'll just reiterate it for the folks at home. The main or the good piece of this being that whatever it is, it's still going to be worked into the bottom line of whatever budget you're going with now, instead of being more of a surprise later on, if that makes sense.
Yep, that makes sense, George. Thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I add something to that?
Absolutely, Mike.
Just one thing, and Dan hit it the nail right on the head there. And this concept makes the budgeting process more predictable and more stable. Instead of being surprised, at the end of the year when you've got a long-term employee who retires and you've got a payout of vacation time that hits, say a small department with a large payout. This is in addition to those the open contracts, as George was speaking to. It also, as Marie was just pointing out in the chat function, it also puts some money in there to account for some of those retirements. We don't always know exactly when people are retiring, but we can predict, and that's what has been done here. So this accounts actually for 4 open contracts. So we've got library, steelworkers, police, and DPW, which is the AFSCME union. Those are the ones that are going to end on June 30th. And then on top of that, an additional amount for some predicted retirements.
I agree on that.
Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
Paul, are you okay with what George is explaining tonight?
Yeah,
is it clear?
I see 2 more hands up. Well, in fairness, I've gotten to hear it twice, so it's more of a question for the rest of the AdCom.
Okay, go ahead, Tom.
But my slight pitch is I do like seeing the dollar amount explicit, right? Because I wondered last year, right? And I'm glad it's a simpler mechanism. The other thing I wanted to make sure of is the numbers were apples to apples, because when some of us came onto the AdCom last year for the first time, the numbers were in, and that's sort of how we learned the salaries work. So I'm confident now that things are apples to apple. So I think that's good too.
You know, the best thing about that is he says he's had to go through it twice and he hasn't jumped off a cliff yet. So that's so I admire him at this point.
George, he almost did. I talked him down the other day. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah. Can we? Are there any preliminary, how do I say, calculations being passed around either through the IRS or through whoever is doing that for what the anticipated COLA will be under a COVID year? And is the COLA adjusted for our purposes for budgeting on a fiscal year basis, July to June, or is it on a calendar year basis, January to December?
In most cases, Tom, first, when you mention about the IRS passing something around for what a COLA is, COLAs are usually negotiated, and they go pretty much fiscal year to fiscal year. I'm not saying that that's what do I say, a law or anything. You could set your contract to start any time that you want. Okay, most of the time for purposes of doing it clean, you try to do it from July 1st to June 30th. Okay. When we talk about the COLAs or the cost of living increases, yeah, you could probably look at an IRS thing and say, well, how much was the increase this year from, what was cost of living go up? What's the the consumer price index, etc. Well, however, most of them are predicated on what the budget can withstand, and they have to be negotiated. I mean, let's say a COLA might be, somebody might come back. I'm giving you an example. I'm not saying that's the case here, but somebody might say, hey, you know something? Our union or my group has been behind the 8 ball for so many years. I want a cost adjustment. Okay, so maybe the COLA is going to go up a little higher. Others might be, I don't think that's the case with most of Foxborough. I think they're pretty much where they ought to be. So for the most part, there is a standard out there. And I mean, and why am I kind of talking around it? Because I kind of sit in on some of the negotiations, and there's sort of a little bit of a limit on saying, well, hey, we're not going to go any more than X. And the truth is, the law says you're supposed to be in negotiating, and you're kind of giving it away beforehand. But let's just say that there's a standard out there, Tom, and I think that Foxborough will be within the level of that standard, if you understand what I'm saying.
I mean, maybe the IRS is the wrong. I'm thinking maybe more Social Security for a cost of living adjustment, or a Medicare cost of living adjustment. Those things are set by the government, and it's going to be spread out over the entire country for everybody, no matter where they are located. And I just didn't know if that type of a standard overriding concept would be something that would be able to be initiated as a standard here, or is it simply just? I understand in contracts you can make up whatever you want in a contract and negotiate through that. Right. I just thought, if in this, that doesn't allow for a situation like we've just had in this past year to accommodate the fact that maybe there is, maybe Social Security says there's not going to be a cost of living adjustment this year because, costs, it didn't move. So then we're paying, 2% more than what, the government would be paying out to people. Right. So I mean, it'd be a good negotiation on their part. And I'm sure there'll be times where cost of living might, in an inflationary period, it might go up higher. But what we've seen in the last maybe 5 to 7 years in this economy has not been large cost of living adjustments. And I always kind of tweaked whenever I hear a flat 2 every single time, because it doesn't seem to accommodate the success of the marketplace over the last bunch of years.
Well, again, what else I'll say on that, I'm just going to talk in generality when we're talking about negotiations. What I will say on that is that I'm sure that will be taken into account by the folks negotiating on both sides, okay? Because that's what you're going back and forth with. Again, even if the government set a standard, I mean, I won't say that the town is held by it either way, either going too high, above it or going below it. So it's out there, but it's part of the negotiation process, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, Social Security doesn't have to negotiate. They just say, here's what it is. You know, there's no negotiation. This is common if you've dealt with union contracts, and I've dealt with many of them. It is a negotiation. The COLA is a negotiation. The steps, the number of steps are a negotiation. Whether you add steps to the top of the range is a negotiation. What is the value of the steps? I mean, it's late, but there's a lot to, the collective bargaining process. And that's why it's really put off to the side by a small group to be able to do these negotiations. One thing without affecting the COLA sometimes is a budget technique that is a middle of the road is you do the COLA, but you delay it. You delay it 3 months or 6 months, and then you save money during that particular fiscal year. So there's a lot of ways of skinning the cat, but it's all at the table.
Oh, sure, I understand. I'm not looking to weaken the town's position in negotiations. I'm just looking at the Social Security page right now, and it says for 2020 it was a 1.3 COLA, and then and it's already saying for 2021 it's going to be a 1.3% COLA. So I just
I'll only leave you with one last thing, Tom, on that, because, like I say, as the previous gentleman just said, you're right. It's all at the table. But I think one of the biggest factors that will be taken into account is we want to maintain a place where if you're hiring whoever it is, a fireman, a policeman, a DPW worker, what you don't want to do is erode your own position so that everybody says, well, why work for Foxborough? I can go across here and do the same thing, and you lose your quality. So that's taken into account as well. So again, even though it might have been 1.3, all these things have to, for the Social Security, a number of things will be taken into account to say, well, I mean, including looking at other towns to say, what's everybody paying this department's workers, okay, whether it's finance or whatever, school. So another thing is, your school is a piece of it as well, so those are the things that have to be taken into account, and I'm sure they are. I mean, I think Bill and Micah are pretty savvy negotiators, and they also have the benefit of legal counsel and what have you too. So there's a bunch of things that have come into it, but again, I don't think there's anything that's solid that you can say, hey, this is what it is, and that's what we're going to stick with for good,
George, so I have a question. So is it fair to say that at the end of the day, this may be called a new account, but it's not a new expense because it was always there. So it's just geography, right?
You are absolutely right. It's the manner in which we're going about doing it. One way or another, if Marie hadn't created the new line, then what we would have done is exactly the same thing. Bill, Mike, and everyone would go out, negotiate the contract, and then just like last year, and I am playing a little fast and loose, Bernard, because I keep the numbers in my head. I don't necessarily have them in front of me. But if you recall last year, I think we went, before all the COVID mess came out, we had a special, and I think we went back and moved some $300,000 at that special town meeting in for two contracts. I think it was the fire and the police, or it might have been just the police at the time, but it was about 300,000. And so had we been doing it the way we were attempting to do it now, okay, we would have already had that built into the budget, and it would have been a product of the bottom line, as opposed to coming back and going to the free cash and taking it back out and doing it later. And then one other little thing is then your when you're in the budget process, it doesn't even show in there. So then people are saying, well, why did you, like in one instance this year, somebody asked why did this particular individual or this particular department have a 6% jump in it when everything's going up? Well, the problem is that we haven't put the money from what's been negotiated in FY21 into that line yet, but we know it's going to go in there. And then they're adjusting for that plus the 2% on top of it for the next year, but it's giving you the impression that there's a jump of 6%, and that's really not what happened. Does that make sense?
100%. And if I may say so, at least I'm looking at page 174 of 223, the footnotes. From a control standpoint, it makes it very clear. At the end of the day, all transfers to be that will be done by the town manager, they would be reported to the Board of Selectmen and AdCom anyway. And also, really, if there is any amount left, let's say from that 193 plus minus, let's say that there is some saving, it's going to close out to free cash. So from a control standpoint, one could argue is that when we will compare to the actuals in FY22, it's probably going to be easy to track. Let's say we will spend 173K. So that 20K difference goes into free cash flow. So from a transparency standpoint, it's clean, in my opinion. Thank you, George.
Yes, you're absolutely spot on. That's what we're trying for, Bernard.
I get it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Stephanie.
Okay, so I mean, it's pretty well known by time on AdCom, and I'm sure my attitude isn't going to change now that I'm going through this process on a different board. You know, some of the issues I've had over the years, and now listening to this, you know, I just assumed the COLA was always 2% because that seems to be what we give. Everything's 2%, then your step on top of it. So you know what I would love to see, George? I mean, it's too late for this budget because I mean we're well into it. But over the years, just the time I've been serving on these two boards, you know, we keep hearing it coming back to, well, we have to be competitive or people aren't going to work here. You know, I hear stories in North Attleboro where, you know, their schools aren't getting any raise. And I kind of feel like we're, you know, not just in a COVID year, but anytime, I believe it was Sharon brought a number to us like 2.46 that she had gotten is what your average employee is getting for a raise if they're getting anything. So part of the problem I've always had with this system is that you're asking, you know, the majority of the people who live in this town and that pay the taxes here aren't employed by the town. You know, some are, but majority aren't. So you have people getting much less than 4% of a raise, but you're asking them to pay their taxes to fund 4% raises. So, you know what I would like to see truly is maybe for next year process. Like I said, I'm not going to throw this on you now. We're too far into it. But I think we really need to see what the towns that are similar to us are paying. And so that people on advisory committee, people on the Board of Selectmen can truly see those numbers, because it seems to me, since I've been involved in this, it's everything, you know, and I'm not a negotiator for contracts, so I don't understand exactly how that process goes, but it just seems like every year it's just 2 and 2, you know. So if we have a COLA truly being 1.3, then that should be a negotiation piece for what we're going to give people for raises. You know, I've just always heard 2 and 2. You know, the 2 is the COLA, 2 is a merit step. So we just keep handing out 4%, but most of the people don't get a 4% raise a year. So not just in Foxborough, anywhere. So I think, you know, I think Foxborough is a desirable place to work. I think we treat our employees fairly. I think going forward, we need to get some numbers and see if we are truly where we need to be, because, you know, each year this budget just keeps it being inflated and inflated. And, you know, just so we know that as an advisory committee and as a board of selectmen, that we are doing making the best decisions we can for the people who live in this town and are paying the taxes, which in turn are paying all these raises. So, like I said, I'm not throwing this on you now, George. Maybe, you know, for next year, we can really see the numbers, because I think for most of us that have, you know, friends, family, we don't see 4% raises. And, you know, if that's what we're getting in our negotiations, we just need to see if we're truly where towns like us are. You know,
well, let me answer that question in a twofold way, because starting out, what you're on to now is a question of, are the negotiations that are taking place and what somebody's negotiating the way it should be, and are we in line with what others are doing, which is maybe an aside point from what the question that was asked is, what is this line doing? And what we're presenting here is a methodology in which we are going to pay for the negotiated contracts with, which, regardless of whether they're 4% or 3%, where are we getting the money and how are we presenting it on the budget? Now, from a standpoint of negotiations, again, as an earlier fellow mentioned, there are certain things that are sat down and looked at, and it is all done at the table. Now, I'm not going to say it's great or it isn't. I can tell you this: I've worked for 6 other towns over the past 35 years, and what you have going here is pretty much the standard of where it is. Now, again, when you say, if you're questioning whether it should be whatever the percentage is, it's more of a question of what are these negotiations doing, and that's really aside from what we're talking about here. But again, I will also say this, because I sat in the seat for many years where I had to negotiate. And when you begin bringing in, well, let's see what everybody else is doing, then if you're on the side where you're looking for the money, then, you know, I'll use myself, I'll be the bad guy. I'll be the thing. So George comes in and says, well, what does the finance director make? So I go and find the guy in the city of Boston, and they're paying him $750,000 or whatever it is. And then on the town side, they go out and they find the town of Berkeley, which has got like 2,000 people working in it, and they're paying them $10.62. So when you begin making the comparison, you want to try to find towns that are like the town that you're in. But again, all of that is something that is sort of an aside point from what we're talking about now. This is the mechanism to fund it. Are we going to take it from free cash, or are we going to put it in the budget? I mean, I have no problem moving forward. I mean, I think that probably when you guys come up, I seem to recall when last year one of these contracts came due, we sat in with the Board of Selectmen and they went over it pretty much with a fine-tooth comb. Here's all the new things that are happening. Here's all the other things that are taking place. This is what it cost here and what it costs there. So, I mean, I know that it isn't in a vacuum anyway. And again, I mean, you know, certainly numbers can be thrown out, but I think it's a separate conversation from what we're talking now.
Oh, and you know something?
Larry, can I suggest we're wasting our time on this? Stephanie is on the Board of Selectmen, and the board can instruct Mike and the town manager to show them a comparative salary survey with half a dozen towns in the area, and can answer that question. That is not a question for the advisory committee. That's a question.
You know something, Jack? Honestly, I may have gone off track a little bit to what George was trying to explain, but this is the first time that I have actually heard, you know, he's saying, so we're going to put this money here and it might have to be adjusted. So in the 4 to 5 years that I've been involved in the budget process, it's never been adjusted. It's 2 and 2. That's what everybody is getting, 2 and 2. It's never been adjusted. That's, I think, why it made me think to go off. So no, you're right. Maybe I went a little too far off what George was trying to explain, but it just like struck a chord with me, because this is the first time I've heard somebody say, well, we'll put that money there and we're not really sure what the amount is going to be, but in the last 4 to 5 years, it has been 4%. It has been 2 and 2. It's the first time I've heard anybody talk about that. We have to wait and see what that number is. That number is, you know, and maybe that's just standard for our contract negotiating. So maybe I went a little far off what the discussion was. It was just the first time I've heard it worded that way.
Well, let me reiterate one more time, okay? When you are in negotiations, and that's why I kind of backed off with Tom. Negotiations are exactly what the word says. You're negotiating. So if we come out and make a statement that says this is going to be 2 and 2, exactly, you are no longer negotiating, and you are telling, you know, you are pretty much projecting that whatever you sit down and do, we're not changing it, which is why I don't want to say it's exactly this or it's exactly that. Secondly, yes, it has been, you know, pretty much that way, but that doesn't preclude, if you sit down at the negotiating table, that maybe, like I said, I'm making these things up. I'm giving you scenarios. I'm not telling you that this is the case, but maybe this particular unit is behind and they need a what is known as parity with, you know, they fell behind someplace and they didn't get there. Is an example. I'm not saying it's the truth. So maybe it isn't 2 for this one. Maybe it's 2 point something to get them back into parity.
George, if I may, I understand what you're trying to say. You cannot tip your hand. I understand what Jack is saying. I understand what Stephanie is saying.
Yes.
If this is something that if the selectman wants to get into detail, I think it's fair that you guys can have what you call an executive session, and then you can show the board of selectmen the composition of 193,000, which is why I asked initially what's the percentage or what's the outstanding. So maybe how you come up with 193,000 is something you can address with the board of selectmen, and then whatever the final amount is, we can vote. AdCom. I think we all said it.
I might have gone a
No, that's okay. No, that's okay.
Yeah,
that's okay. I think everybody has valid point. And George, believe me, I understand what you cannot say too much when it comes to certain things. So this is something, it's a good question, but I think it can be handled at the Board of Selectmen executive session.
You're right.
You okay with that, Jack?
Can I ask a question? I think I'm on the same page as Jack here.
Oh, go ahead.
What we're deciding here is, you know, do we approve of this as being a budget line item? We don't, as AdCom, we don't care about the negotiations. We don't necessarily care about the 2+2, because that's something that the Board of Selectmen negotiates with whoever. What we're deciding now is whether we should include this now in the budget, or whether we should have it be passed on to special town meeting to be pulled in later. Am I correct on that?
Yes, I would say you're exactly right on that.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to be sure.
Yes. That's why I know that the conversation got sidetracked a little, but you're right. Those are all valid questions that, you know, maybe the selectmen can get the exact detail of how you came up with 193,000.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions for George? Hearing none. Thank you, George. Thank you for talking to us.
Well, thank you for having me, as usual, you guys. And again, if you guys have anything, you don't have to wait until a meeting. I told this to Paul the other day. We had a great luncheon meeting. I was sitting in Patriots Place parking lot with my McDonald's cheeseburger, and we had a hell of a nice lunch. So you just call if you have a question. We here. We'll answer it for you. I like to answer in face and not talking to you, not trying to type it on a piece of paper or something.
Yeah, I understand. I understand.
All right.
Thank you. Good night. Good night, George.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks,
All right.
George.
The last housekeeping item is next week is the school committee will be coming in to present to EdCom. So I will send the agenda to everyone, hopefully within a day or two. But next Wednesday is the next meeting. And I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. So moved. Second?
Aye.
Good. All right. Roll call. Well, I'm sorry. We'll do roll call. Bernard? Good. Jack?
Yes.
Good. Sharon?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Paul?
Absolutely.
Dennis?
Yes.
Brian? Brian might have left the meeting, so we'll skip him. Tom?
Oh, yeah.
Good. John Mahoney?
Yes, thank you.
Brad, you can vote now. All right. And me, yes. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you for coming. See you next week.
Thanks, Larry.
Bye.